Hi everyone and welcome to another Heroes and Bosses video. This time I'm painting the Spindle Drones from Blackstone Fortress. Just like with the Urguls, I'm starting off by filling in the gaps and priming the miniatures in grey. Now this turned out to be a pain in the butt, since I forgot how bad Ulthuan Grey is at painting over darker colours. So learn from my mistake and either do a zenithal prime on yours, or just prime them completely with either a pure white or Corax white. So after 4 agonizing layers of Ulthuan Grey on each miniature, I'm going to paint in some shadows. Now this part is optional. You could, from here, use a black wash over the miniature and then highlight back up to Ulthuan Grey, but I wanted to try something a bit different. The first thing I'm doing is painting in where I want my shadows with Celestra Grey. As I add each shadow color, I'm also using a damp brush to feather the color back to create a fading effect. And I'm using the character art as a reference here rather than reinventing the wheel. Once I'm happy with that, I'm mixing in a bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey to darken up my shade color, and then I'm painting in some darker shadows. Next I'm going to wet blend the edges of my shadows, first with some pure Celestra Grey, drawing the paint away from the deepest shadows. Then I'll do the same with the Ulthuan Grey, wet blending it into the Celestra Grey and pulling the paint up the model. The final step is to use a pure white to paint all the edges and ridges to give them some definition. Now as I said, this method is optional. You can get a similar effect by just using a black wash on the entire model, then touching it up with Ulthuan Grey, and finally doing your edge highlight. The method I'm using is time consuming, but I do like the smooth color fading. That's the hard part over with, and next I'm painting the rest of the body, excluding the legs, with gunmetal from Army Painter. Next I'm mixing in an equal amount of Abaddon Black into the metal, and I'm using this for the legs. Next I'm using Nuln Oil Gloss as my wash. You can of course use regular Nuln Oil, but this one settles into the recesses better and doesn't tint the original color as much. I'm covering all of these silvery metal areas with this wash. When it comes to the white part of the drone, I'm only putting wash into the grooves. I've got a small amount on my brush and I'm tracing along each line. And I'm also putting a small dab into the little holes in the front. Once the wash is dried, I'm just touching up any spots where the wash spilled over with a bit of Ulthuan Grey or white scar, depending on where the wash settled. Next I'm going to add a bit of color to these guys with some Khorne Red, and I'm using this on the cables hanging down from underneath the main body. Now I'm going to use 3 colors for the eye in the front. The first color is a roughly 50-50 mix of White Scar and Screamer Pink, and I'm covering the entire eye with this. There's also a smaller light or eye just below this, and I'm going to paint that as well. Next I'm painting a smaller circle in the center of the eye with the Pixie Pink, though you could just add more White Scar to your Screamer Pink if you don't have this color. And then finally a small dab of White Scar in the center. and then I'll do the same thing with a smaller light. And just to blend these colors together, I'm using a small amount of thinned down Carroburg Crimson on the entire eye. So that's the entire miniature painted, and next is the base. This part is totally optional, of course. You can just paint the entire base black and call it a day. I'm going to do a bit more with mine, starting with a few rocks that I'm attaching with super glue. I'm also adding a few random patches of texture to the ground. This stuff is Astrogranite from Games Workshop. Once that's dried, I'm painting the entire base with Abaddon Black. Next, I'm going to paint the bases to look like one of the game tiles. These bases are going to have pink electrical bolts on the ground. So first off, I'm going to dry brush the rocks, dirt, and that raised ridge in the middle of the base with Naggoroth Night. I'm then following that up with a dry brush of Xereus Purple. To create the pink electrical bolts, I'm first painting some zigzagging lines about 2 brush strokes thick with Xereus Purple. I'm then painting a thin line right down the center of the zigzags with Genestealer Purple. And finally, I'm going to add another line down the center on top of the Genestealer with Pixie Pink. I put 2 layers of this on to make sure it really shone through. And then as a final highlight, I used some Slantish Grey to dry brush any surfaces that were facing the pink electrical bolts. And I couldn't help adding just a little more purple, so the last step I did on the base was to dab some thinned down Naggoroth Night all around the bolts. It looks bright on camera, but it did dry much darker. And that completes the Spindle Drones from Blackstone Fortress. I will be painting the rest of these as soon as possible, as I have to say I'm really enjoying these miniatures. Thank you very much to everyone supporting me on Patreon, it is very much appreciated. Also special thanks to Brian Jones for supporting this channel. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.